In Mayfair, a ruined reputation is a quiet, bloodless execution. When the Ton caught Beatrice Hastings in a shadowed garden alcove with a penniless rogue, the vicious whispers started before the carriages even departed. She was the sensible sister, throwing herself on the social pyre to save her beautiful, foolish sibling from ruin. It was a flawless sacrifice. But the next morning, Arthur Pendleton, the Duke of Westmoreland, knocked on her door. He didn't come with pity, he came with a ring. The heat in the Duke of Richmond's ballroom was thick enough to drown in. It smelled of wilting gardenias, damp powder, and the desperate ambition of 200 aristocratic mothers. Beatrice Hastings stood by the punch bowl, a strategic position that allowed her to watch the room without participating in it. At 24, she was already slipping comfortably into the role of the spinster aunt. Her dress was a muted sage, a color chosen by her mother to ensure she didn't clash with her younger sister Clara, who was radiating in rose silk in the center of the room. Clara was the investment. Beatrice was merely the chaperone. Beatrice took a slow sip of lukewarm lemonade. Her eyes tracked the dance floor. Clara had been dancing with Lord Abernathy, the wealthy earl their father had cornered into a courtship. But Clara was no longer in the set. A prickle of unease started at the base of Beatrice's neck. She set the glass down. The crystal clinked sharply against the silver tray. She scanned the perimeter, noting the empty terrace doors. Clara was a romantic. Romantics in Mayfair invariably got themselves destroyed. Slipping past a cluster of gossiping dowagers, Beatrice stepped out into the night air. The contrast was a physical blow. The damp chill of the London night clung to the manicured hedges. She walked briskly down the gravel path, her thin slippers crunching quietly. "Please, Thomas, we cannot." The voice was a panicked whisper. It came from the stone gazebo near the edge of the property. Beatrice froze, then moved faster. She rounded the marble pillars and stopped dead. Clara was pressed against the cold stone, her face flushed, a rose silk gown slipping dangerously off her left shoulder. Thomas Linfield stood entirely too close, his hands bracketing her waist. Linfield was a known quantity, a younger son with a gambling habit, a devastating smile, and no prospects. A black hole in a tailored coat. "Clara!" Beatrice snapped. Her voice wasn't loud, but it hit the alcove like a gunshot. Linfield stepped back, blinking in the dim light, though he didn't look particularly embarrassed. Clara let out a choked sob and rushed toward Beatrice, clutching her ruined bodice. "Bea!" Clara gasped, her voice trembling. He asked me to step outside just for a moment to say goodbye. I didn't know." "You did know," Beatrice said flatly. She didn't look at her sister. She kept her eyes fixed on Linfield. "Button your coat, Mr. Linfield. You are leaving." "Now, Miss Hastings, there's no need for hostility. Clara and I simply—" "If you finish that sentence, I will scream and tell the Earl of Abernathy you tried to force yourself upon me. He has a notoriously poor temper and a very large collection of dueling pistols." Linfield's smirk vanished. He opened his mouth, then closed it, stepping toward the secondary path that led to the street. Before he could take 3 steps, the unmistakable crunch of multiple footsteps echoed from the main garden path. High-pitched, aristocratic laughter floated through the night air. Lady Danbury and her notoriously vicious coterie of gossips was taking a stroll to escape the heat. Clara's breath hitched. She looked down at herself, the torn lace, the flushed skin, the loose hair. "Bea," she whispered, pure terror stripping the youth from her face. "Abernathy is proposing tomorrow. If they see him here—" Beatrice looked at the approaching shadows cast by the torches. She looked at Clara. The beautiful, foolish girl who was their family's only hope of avoiding bankruptcy. Their father's debts were a poorly kept secret. Abernathy's fortune was the only thing standing between the Hastings family and debtor's prison. Pragmatism had always been Beatrice's curse. "Take off your shawl," Beatrice ordered, unpinning her own modest grey wrap. "What?" "The shawl, Clara! Give it to me!" Beatrice snatched the embroidered pink silk from her sister's trembling hands. She threw her grey wrap at Clara. "Go through the rose trellis. Sneak back through the conservatory. Tell Mother you tore your hem and had to visit the retiring room. Go. Now." Clara hesitated for a fraction of a second before self-preservation kicked in. She fled into the dark. Beatrice stood alone with Linfield. She draped the pink shawl over her shoulders, pulling it off-center so it looked hurried. She reached up and pulled 3 pins from her hair, letting the heavy brown strands fall in disarray. Linfield stared at her, horrified. "What are you doing?" "Saving my family, Mr. Linfield. Now stand close to me and look guilty." "But do it!" Linfield stepped closer just as the torchlight rounded the corner. "Oh, my word!" Lady Danbury's voice pierced the night, sharp and delighted. Beatrice turned. The light blinded her for a moment, but she could see the silhouette of 4 women. She felt the cold stone of the gazebo against her back. She dropped her gaze to the gravel, playing the part of the court maiden. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the shocked silence of a tragedy. It was the breathless silence of a predator finding fresh meat. "Miss Beatrice Hastings," Lady Danbury sneered, her eyes raking over Beatrice's undone hair and the notorious Mr. Linfield. "Well, it seems the quiet ones are always the most dangerous." Beatrice didn't say a word. She held her chin steady, absorbing the ruin. The morning room of the Hastings townhouse smelled of stale toast and impending doom. Beatrice sat in the high-backed armchair near the window. The rain lashed against the glass in a rhythmic, merciless beat. It suited her mood. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Lady Danbury's venomous delight. Her father, Lord Hastings, was pacing the length of the Persian rug. The veins in his neck were pulsing against his cravat. "Ruined!" he spat, not looking at Beatrice. "Entirely ruined. I had 3 notes delivered before 9 o'clock. 3, the cut direct from the Countess of March, and Lady Jersey has formally struck us from the Almack's list." Clara sat on the velvet sofa, weeping softly into a handkerchief. It was a picturesque weeping, delicate and tragic. Beatrice watched her sister without anger, only a deep, settling exhaustion. Clara had confessed nothing. When Beatrice was brought back into the ballroom in disgrace last night, Clara had stood by their mother, pale and silent. "I am sorry, Papa," Beatrice said. Her voice was scratchy from disuse. "Sorry?" Her father whirled on her. "You are 24. You were supposed to be the sensible one, throwing yourself at a penniless degenerate in the bushes like a common streetwalker. If Abernathy withdraws his suit for Clara because of the taint you've brought on this house, I will send you to the Scottish borders. You can rot there." Clara sobbed louder. Beatrice looked at the cold dregs in her teacup. "Abernathy won't withdraw. Clara is too pretty and he is too proud to care about the actions of a spinster sister. Do not speak to me with that insolent tone," Lord Hastings roared. The heavy oak door to the morning room opened. Higgins, the ancient butler, stepped in. His face was entirely devoid of colour, an impressive feat for a man who usually looked permanently flushed from stolen sherry. "My lord," Higgins stammered. "What is it, Higgins? More returned invitations? Bring them in. Let us build a bonfire with our disgrace." "No, my lord, you have a caller." Lord Hastings sneered. "Who would call on us today? Send the voyeur away." "It is the Duke of Westmoreland, my lord." The weeping on the sofa stopped instantly. Lord Hastings froze mid-pace. The silence in the room was so thick it had a physical weight. Arthur Pendleton, the Duke of Westmoreland, did not make morning calls. He was 32, possessor of one of the largest fortunes in England, and famously intolerant of society. He attended events only when politically necessary, stood in corners looking bored, and cut down conversationalists with an icy, ruthless intelligence. He was a man who moved kings on a chessboard, not a man who visited disgraced minor nobility in the rain. "Show him in!" Lord Hastings wheezed, suddenly smoothing his lapels with frantic hands. "Clara, sit up straight. Dry your eyes. Beatrice, go to your room, immediately." Beatrice stood. She had no desire to be gawked at by a duke. She moved towards the secondary door that led to the servants' hall. Before she could reach the handle, the main doors opened wide. Arthur Pendleton stepped into the room. He was a tall man, entirely unadorned by the fussy fashions of the day. He wore a dark riding coat that fit perfectly over broad shoulders, devoid of embroidery or excess velvet. His hair was black, shot through with a premature streak of silver at the right temple, and his eyes were a pale, piercing grey. He looked around the room, taking in the frantic father, the tear-stained beauty, and finally the ruined sister hovering by the exit. "Your Grace." Lord Hastings practically bowed. "This is an unexpected honour. Please, sit." Westmoreland did not sit. He handed his gloves and riding crop to the trembling butler. "Lord Hastings, I apologize for the intrusion." "Not at all, not at all. May I present my daughter, Clara? You may have seen her at the Richmond ball last night." Westmoreland glanced at Clara. It was a clinical look, completely devoid of the warmth men usually showed her. "I saw her." Clara flushed under the scrutiny. "And," Lord Hastings swallowed hard, waving a dismissive hand toward the back of the room, "my eldest daughter Beatrice. She was just leaving." Westmoreland's pale eyes shifted to Beatrice. He held her gaze. A strange electric jolt sparked down her spine. There was no pity in his face, no disgust, only a sharp, calculating intelligence. "She will stay," Westmoreland said. The tone was quiet, but it was not a request. Lord Hastings blinked. Yes, of course. Beatrice, sit." Beatrice slowly moved back to her armchair, her heart beating a strange, erratic rhythm against her ribs. She folded her hands in her lap to hide their sudden tremor. I am a man who appreciates brevity, Hastings," the Duke said, turning back to her father. "I have not come to discuss the weather or your younger daughter's impending betrothal to Abernathy." Lord Hastings looked confused. "Then, to what do we owe this pleasure, Your Grace?" Westmoreland didn't look at the father. He kept his eyes fixed entirely on Beatrice. "I have come to ask for your eldest daughter's hand in marriage." Clara gasped. Lord Hastings stumbled back a step, hitting the edge of a side table. A porcelain shepherdess crashed to the floor, shattering into dozens of pieces. Nobody looked at it. "Your Grace," Lord Hastings choked out. I fear you are mistaken. You mean Clara. Beatrice is... Well, there was a misunderstanding last night." "I am aware of what happened last night," Westmoreland said smoothly. "I am not mistaken. I want Beatrice." Beatrice stared at him. The man was mad. Or this was some cruel, elaborate joke devised by the Tun to punish her further. But looking into those slate-grey eyes, she saw no amusement. "Why?" Beatrice spoke for the first time. Her voice was raspy, cutting through the heavy silence of the room. Her father shot her a look of pure terror, but Westmoreland merely tilted his head. "Because, Miss Hastings," the Duke said, stepping closer to her chair, "I am in need of a duchess, and I have a strong preference for women who do not panic in the dark." Lord Hastings ushered Clara out of the room, with the frantic energy of a man trying to secure a winning lottery ticket before the wind blew it away. The heavy doors clicked shut, leaving Beatrice